You're listening to the Australian Hunting and Beyond podcast with Matt, where we talk about hunting, shooting, fishing, camping, and everything else that the great outdoors has to offer. Let's get into it. All right, we've got Felix back tonight and some big news for people that don't really have you on social media. They might not know. But before we get into the big news, mate, wanted to talk to you about, I know you've been chasing a pretty decent Rubar down there. Mate, let's hear all about it. What's going on? How are you?
Yeah, g'day guys. Thanks for having me back again. Good to be back on the show. Yeah, a little bit of a obsessive case at the moment. I've found myself and another local hunter are kind of sharing a good bit of information about a few local blocks that we hunt adjoining blocks on, and have become aware of a fairly large Rubar that's getting around. Great big Sambar Rusa hybrid stag who's emerged from God knows where, and he's tormenting our dreams at the moment and absorbing a lot of time that should be spent sleeping or with the family or doing any kind of other thing. And he's a fairly spectacular beastie that as yet has eluded everyone who's gone after him. So a bit of a white whale.
So when you're saying eluded, are you saying that he is across multiple properties? He's multiple hunters hunt the same property? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, he seems to be an incredibly switched-on animal. It's a funny debate that we often have between the public land hunters, considering that the private land hunters have it incredibly easy, and in some ways we absolutely do. But as a major downfall of a lot of the private blocks, especially here, is that a lot of them are fairly small, and the average range of some of these bigger, more mature deer seems to encompass several properties. And I think thus far, between me and the other one bloke who's chasing this one particularly fiercely and a couple of others who are aware of him, I think we've all laid eyes on him at least once, but never yet on the legally appropriate side of the fence for each of us to be able to do anything about it. I've seen him on 2 adjoining properties during legal daytime shooting hours, and the other bloke who's after him, he's seen him on my side of the fence, and he seems to be incredibly skilled and or gifted at staying on the right side of the fence to keep himself away from our bullets at this time. So it's it's pretty interesting. There's certainly something to it. I think it goes along with the deep spiritual supernatural connection humans have had with chasing deer for a long time. They just seem to know. So it's been an interesting pursuit, but as yet he's still safe and going strong.
Yeah, right. So we have had Rick on previously, and he shot a pretty big Rubar down somewhere down there, I believe. Mate, any idea of what this guy is looking like? Is he bigger? Is he, on par? Do you have sort of an idea?
Yeah, Rick and I have had a bit of a debate about this. We can't yet come to the decision as to whether or not he's bigger in the antlers. We think he's probably taller at the shoulder. I was lucky enough to see Rick's big Rubar that he got. And I would say this one tends more towards the Sambar proportions of height at the shoulder, whereas Rick's was a stockier model. Carcass weight, they're probably on par with each other. But this one's he's got a fairly regal kind of look to him. He's got a fairly shiny coat, as opposed to the usual bedraggled look that a lot of the Rusa and the Rubar have around here when they've dinged each other up in the fights. But no, until we can get him on the ground, we're not really sure whether he's bigger on par, slightly smaller, but he's as impressive in every way, and the pursuit is shaping up to be a similarly long-winded affair.
So with him, you sort of said before that between public and private, and I sort of haven't got a great deal of experience with private land, but I sort of think about public and think the deer, obviously they turn nocturnal, or they just know where not to be during the day, which is huntable and what's not. And I saw that down at this year's croak camp, because the deer literally had moved out into the red zone in the forests, and they were croaking all around, but none of them were really in that shooting area, so it was a bit of a pain. Do you find it's a little different? Because I understand there's boundaries, but there's pressure coming from different blocks? Because like if it's a non-huntable sort of area in state forest, it's non-huntable. So they're not really going to be spooked back on that side of the fence, as opposed to a private block. If you've got someone hunting on the adjoining block, they could spook them onto yours and vice versa.
Yeah, we do get a bit of that. There's a couple of blocks where they're driven fairly nocturnally. Inversely, though, we've actually got a few blocks that, because of the increasing uptake amongst a lot of the landowners of thermal, infrared, spotlighting, and just generally considering the deer more as a vermin and just going after them at all hours of the night, we've actually got a big swing back towards them being more active in the daylight. And I think their patterns have worked out that if they're getting shot at it kind of all the way up until midnight and 2 a.m., they actually swing and, funnily enough, become more active through the middle of the day, which is incredibly frustrating if you've got a 4G camera and you're sitting at work and you're getting notifications of a certain deer that you'd really, really, really like to get hands on, and he's strutting about in the middle of the day having a bit of a graze at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Whereas normally, without that nocturnal pressure, I think he probably wouldn't be active at that hour and he'd be back in the trees having a snooze. But because where they normally get their nocturnal grazing in, they can't do it safely, they actually, funnily enough, swing back the other way and become more daylight active. So it's a reverse to what some of the traditional logic would say. But it's interesting to see the different hunting pressures in different areas and how that shapes what they get up to.
Yeah, look, it fascinates me when we talk about just deer and their patterning and how they will change that if they get disrupted or what's going on in the local environment. So always something that intrigues me as to how switched on an animal they are, which is a great thing and probably why we love them so much. But all right, mate. Well, listen, you've got big news, and I'm glad you've come on the show. What is that news?
Yeah, so the good news is it's good news and it's big news. It's a thing that has happened just through a confluence of different circumstances and is thankfully giving my mind and my soul a bit of a reprieve from chasing the deer around. I've got a different battle to focus on. I've been selected and approved to stand as the Shooters, Fishers and Farmers candidate for the upcoming by-election, which is back nice and close to home here on the coast. There was a bit of a kerfuffle with the previous independent candidate, and through various events and life choices, he's found himself unable to continue his term as the elected representative, so we've got a by-election for the Lower House New South Wales seat of Kiama. So I've chucked my hat in for that one, and gonna have a little bit of a tilt at the political game.
Well, look, it's probably a good time because I don't know if people are keeping up with the variety of things that we see and that are getting tossed about by the government. But the latest that I saw just has absolutely blown my mind in the sense that they were talking about taxing if you've got spare bedrooms at home, that you have a house that's too big for you. So we'll tax you in order to hopefully have people downsize or sell houses to make them affordable or more stock, I suppose, for the need that we have for houses here in New South Wales. And I think it was Australia actually, but it's just something I just went, what the hell is going on? And where do people come up with this common sense? Like how is that common sense? It really baffles me, some of these politicians, where they come up to this. And I think that people like yourself with a bit of, I guess, sensibility is probably what's needed.
It's an interesting thing that, I mean, everyone likes to think that their way of thinking is commonsensical, but I've been heartened by some of the response I've had. We're fairly early in the campaign, but it's only a short campaign. And some of the things that without going out of my way to offend anyone or try to upset people, I've actually got a fairly good response thus far with just laying out some of what I would consider to be common sense responses, and things like that, and a couple of the other issues that have come to the fore. That the gambling issues are becoming a big one, and I'm sure it's going to become a fairly pertinent issue within this by-election. We have the ability to resolve most of these problems with common sense, and by actually stepping back and looking at the problem and how to solve the problem and how to measurably use the information we have to solve the problem. It's just incredible the amount of, I guess for want of a better term, politics that gets in the way of it, and things that are thrown up as, oh, because you believe this, you must therefore also believe this. Alternately, you must also be opposed to this. And I don't know how this will go. I'm very optimistic that we're getting good results and that we hopefully won't be embarrassed on polling day. But it's certainly opened up some conversations for people to actually have a good talk and to realise that most people are more on the same page than they're against each other. We just put these funny little lines in the way that we kind of, by association, have to therefore be for or against a whole variety of other people, when the vast majority, if we took a step back, would probably agree on 90% of the issues.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate, to be honest. Like, I mean, you're always going to have your outliers and people that don't agree with your perspective or your point of view. But I think for the vast majority of people, things that make sense, and I just look at things, and we'll get into maybe a couple of things going on down there, but like just looking at this housing crisis, and for me, I sort of sit there and go, there's a couple of simple fixes. I think have a look at migration, potentially put in something like what America does, in the sense that bring people in for the skilled jobs that we need and we have a lack of. We could talk about doctors, nurses, teachers. That would be a really good starting point to get people in to do jobs that we really can't sort of use, and those people are doing massive hours. I mean, the poor nurses is insane. And then I sort of sit there and go, as I mentioned before, that tax on a room, and then you talk about when someone passes away, the probate period is anywhere between 4-6 months, possibly longer, and you have a house that sits there empty potentially, and you can't do anything about that. You can't even add it for rent, and it just seems like, instead of looking at something like that, where you have a perfectly good house that someone no longer is with us to use, we're going to ignore that, and we've got to go through the whole court system and pay a heap of money, and then it's still being vacated, as opposed to let's look at taxing a room, or potentially getting people, like, which I think is a crazy idea, but having a family and then bringing in some random to rent the room so you don't get taxed. Like, it really is very, very interesting, and I can't understand how they come to these solutions, or maybe other people out there think these are great ideas and I'm one of the odd ones out. I don't know, but it really fascinates me how many people's minds work in very, very different ways.
I think a big part of it is the disconnect that we have with a lot of the people who are involved and have an entire career of being the think tank and the thinkers, being so far disconnected from the everyday, the doers, for want of a better term, that they probably are unaware of the everyday kind of, for yours and my term, common sense ways to resolve these things. A perfect example with the probate is we've got a house that's very, very close to where I live down here. Beautiful little spot. It's probably not particularly appealing to developers. It's not particularly modern or spacious, but it's a nice little house that could very, very easily house a couple of people very efficiently. And I know the owners of it. They've gone through a death in the family, and the thing has just sat there empty for exactly the reasons you've just said, with probate sitting there. It can't have anything done to it until the probate clears and until all the other hurdles have been overcome. And we've got that on top of all of the other stuff, but somehow that, as you say, gets missed. Another big problem we have down here that I'm very hopeful to bring attention to as part of the campaign are the fairly rampant expansion of housing estates with no particular push towards infrastructure. And it would seem as a fairly common sense solution or common sense step when you talk to most people, that you would go through and actually assess the infrastructure for the intended number of houses that are going into any given area. But we don't seem to. We seem to just kind of go hell for leather. And a justification that I've heard from a lot of people is that we need to put the houses in first to get the tax money and the rates from the residents to then build the roads to support the houses. But that's putting the cart entirely before the horse as far as I'm concerned, because the construction of the houses goes more efficiently if the road infrastructure and stormwater and sewage infrastructure is in first. And then the habitation of the houses as they get built goes more smoothly as it goes forward with better infrastructure put in first. And then the people are able to more efficiently get in and start inhabiting those. The flip side to the price issue being the fact that very often with the rampant increase we've got in the price of all of these projects, very often the money that's saved by waiting for the residents to be in and paying the rates is negated by the fact that the project costs so much more 10 or 15 years after its initial planning that the savings been entirely lost.
Well, it's funny you talk about that, and I think the last podcast I might have been talking about, like the US called it Doge, or Department of Government Efficiency, and where we're spending the money. And I think Victoria is the perfect example of that. Like what they did with firearms, they've now done the machete ban, and then I think the bin. So I don't know if you've seen this, but the bin cost is absolutely ridiculous.
The
I
the
think
the,
they
Fer- the, Ferrari, the Ferrari bins.
well, $325,000 per bin. I think overall it's about $13 million. They want to be laced with gold, as far as I'm concerned. Because you think about firearms, we have to store them. Our safes are probably a little bit more important than the machetes, in my opinion. I don't know about you, but I've never paid $325,000 for a safe. That's just like, where does this come from? Like, how is it that there must be, as you sort of said, the think tank, the design team, there must be a million different groups with their finger in the pie here, because we seem to do so many things backwards. And it sort of comes to that, I guess the old saying is that it's much easier to spend other people's money. And unfortunately, I feel that that's what really happens with our government is they're spending tax money, which is not their money. And it would be really interesting if we looked at some sort of capacity where they, I guess, got paid on a sliding scale of waste and how much money they spent to what they achieved, similar to like a commission structure for sales representatives. You might see politicians take it a bit more serious rather than spending $325,000 on a metal box. A few of them, obviously, for that 13 million, but I think it's only 40 off the top of my head. It's something like that, but that just seems ridiculous. And it sort of touched, while you were talking about that, saying let's get this in to get more money, instead of going, you know what, where are we wasting money? Because we're one of the highest tax nations in the world. There is still a lot of issues in this country and a lot of waste, as we've just sort of, spoken about with those machete bins.
There absolutely is, and it's rampant across all levels of government. And if I had a magic wand, I would absolutely wave it to fix it. There's a few practical steps that can certainly be taken, and what key example of kind of the waste and the disconnect that comes from one, I guess, left hand not talking to right hand, for want of a better term, and a lot of it is pretty similar with that. I'm sure that the Victorian government could have approached any number of possible builders for those machete boxes, and could have come up with a different scheme to have had a more cost-effective result. A prime example here in the Kiama electorate is the roadworks that are going on at the moment. So we've got a fairly historic old bridge in one of the local towns here that is about 127 years old, and obviously built to deal with above and beyond the conditions it was built for and the time period it was built for. But obviously the world has evolved and things have gone forward, and vehicles are heavier than horses and carts used to be. And a really crazy disconnect of that is we've now got to the point that because of failure to upgrade and maintain and look at a possible alternate crossing of the river to preserve this historic bridge long term, we've now come screamingly to the point that we've got one crossing of the river, a fairly significant crossing between the highlands and the coast. And it's now been reduced so that it can't handle any more than 23 tonne, and is even having to have emergency night works going on to maintain its ability to handle basic light car traffic under the 23 tonne mark. But simultaneously, a couple of $1 million has been spent on shoring up the adjoining roads on either side to ensure that they are safe and possible for heavy vehicle transport. So the left hand is spending money doing up the road and the mountain passes to make sure that they're still able to handle the heavy vehicles and stuff that is required for business to continue being conducted between the highlands and the coastal area. But somehow someone forgot the bridge in the middle of the whole thing. So it's farcical the more you look at it, and I'm not exactly sure what the solution is, but I think it's cooler heads looking at bigger pictures and actually looking at what then connects to what then connects to what then connects. As a prime example, to throw it back across the border at the Mexicans, is the fact that they've gone through and not only spent a ridiculous amount of money on a few metal boxes for some machetes, the legal system's not keeping up with it, because just in the headlines today, a couple of young offenders who have used machetes in a violent attack to terrorise their victims, and I don't remember the details whether they actually inflicted injury, but they certainly intimidated and acted as if they were going to use the machetes to inflict injury, have now been released after 1 day in custody. So you've got the vast expenditure of money on the boxers to lock up the machetes and take machetes off the streets, while simultaneously not actually having a legal system that backs up the punishment to the people who actually commit the offences with the machetes. So it's a little bit silly and probably not particularly commonsensical.
Well, this is the problem. And I do feel that politics is a very unique sort of field. And I'm very against career politicians. And I would love to see something in the system where you can only serve for maybe 3 or 4 years or something, one term. So you're in and you're out. And that's for all levels, not having, I guess, that ability to stay and sit in Parliament and be disconnected and not know what it is. Because I do really feel our current Prime Minister is so far from thinking. I know he pictures that he's, came from sort of poverty and a single mother, working mother, and blah, blah, blah. But in the same time, he's doing a lot of things for the housing sort of, which is hurting people. And then he's going out and buying, I think, what was it, $4.5 million house or something. It sort of contradicts, and you sort of go, okay, you might have came from here a long time ago, but you're now not there. As much as you sell that, you're really not. You're not struggling week to week and getting smashed with taxes and all the rest that come about it, and the cost of living is going through the roof, and all these electricity prices to hit a goal, while we've got China putting in 2 new power plants every week and coal stations, I should say, and we're trying to get this emissions target even though we're 0.02%. Like, there's all these things that you sit back and go, who's thinking of this? I mean, I saw something the other day, Q8 every 24 hours is just, they have like in the desert just burning tyres. They are literally just burning rubber tyres and the fire never goes out. And I sit there and look at that and then go, the rest of the Western world is carrying on about we've got to go green to stop the issue. And it's whether it be cows or whatever. And here we've got thousands of tyres going up in smoke literally every single day on a constant burn. We don't see that. We don't hear about these things. And it's very interesting when I see and hear, and then we've got, the youngest senator who just seems to be throwing out TikToks and whatnot. From South Australia, I think she is, and she's sitting on $200,000, and you're like, she has zero life experience. This is her first job. She's going to be a career politician who has never really had to do a difficult thing. It's really a popularity contest, and knowing you and I speak a lot, and thinking about you're in this popularity contest now. Does it feel weird? Because that's what it is. You are literally just trying to secure people's votes to be the most popular person, even if your ideas, you don't actually believe them. I'm not saying that about you, because I obviously think you are the opposite, that you're putting things forward to make the community a better place. But I don't think a lot of politicians do that. I really do feel politicians do what's in their best interest to get re-elected.
Oh, of course. And you're 100% right. It's an incredibly strange event. I'm incredibly grateful that I've been given the opportunity for it, because one of my the opposite of what you're saying there with the young senator, not as a different point, it's just at the other end of the spectrum. One of my biggest bugbears with politics is that it seems to be that the decisions of the nation are made almost exclusively by people who don't have much time left to live in the nation they're creating. So I like the fact that there are younger people in there, and when I was given the opportunity as one of the not yet old people to actually stand for a party whose values I believe in and align with, I had to take it for exactly that reason, that I kind of had to stop myself being deemed by myself as a hypocrite for not taking the opportunity. I have to have a run at it and see how it goes, but I'm fully aware. I'm fully aware that there are people who, like me, and even for the popularity side of it, like me, probably agree with a lot of what I'm saying, but for a multitude of other reasons, will hedge their bet and vote differently and won't put me as their number one. And simultaneously, some people that I probably don't have much in common with may well end up putting me as number one. So it's a not even as simple as a straight popularity contest. It's a really bizarre, multi-layered popularity contest of overlapping who I am, who people think I am, who people think I could be, what I stand for, what the party stands for, the party's history, the party's potential future, and all of the other candidates, all of their layers as well. It's a really strange thing. As to the idea of limited terms, it's a really interesting thing that a lot of the politicians whose I would consider to be good mentors, including a couple that I've seen through some of the American stuff, are people who go by that very ethic that you get in, you serve 2 terms. If you can't get it done in 2 terms, you won't get it done in 3, and you won't be a person that you respect by the time you've done 4. The flip side to that is another side of politics that I don't like from the career politician side that is being thrown around in the current debate are the kind of people that, oh, well, I've served on a council, so therefore state is my next logical step. I don't think that applies at all. I know some people who are incredible councillors for their local government areas who would be useless federal politicians, and I don't think it should be a natural progression that you should just step up the rungs to keep staying in the political system. But wherever we've got it, it's such a different, grimy, strange game. I can see why most people don't want a bar to do with it, and to be perfectly honest, had the opportunity not come at the right time for this by-election opportunity, I would probably have steered clear of it myself. It's there's too many things to go into it, and I can see how it doesn't excuse the people who do bizarre things as they're going through, falling apart as human beings, but I can see why people fall apart as human beings for getting into it, because you could tie yourself in knots worrying about all the possibilities of what might happen or what might this or what might the other, that I think it's a far easier policy just to be a fairly straight shooter and have the thoughts and the conversations to yourself about where your convictions lie, and then speak to those points honestly, because you could never keep up with the lies otherwise. I don't know how the professional lying politicians do it. They must sleep in some kind of bizarre pretzel knot every night.
Well, I think it comes down to the news cycle, to be honest. I think, if you go back and you look at politicians, I see it a lot in that they'll say one thing and then a couple of years they say another thing and they get smashed on it. Now, I'm actually not against that, to be honest, because I'm very big on reevaluating your position and thinking about things. And, because you had a position 2 years ago doesn't mean it should be the exact same 2 years in the future. That we should take into consideration context and circumstances changing, and even education and whatnot changing the way we think of things. So it's really funny in that, like exactly what you're sort of saying is that people might change their ideas and then they get smashed for it, or the opposite is that they just lie and just try and say whatever they think is going to be the best case scenario to get them the most votes at the time. And I don't know how you fix it. I don't know what you would do, and I don't know how the whole political atmosphere would change, because it is such a dirty sort of game where you're relying on wins at the expense of somebody else because someone owes you a favor because you voted some way or you supported something. And I don't understand. And what you just mentioned about, that progressive step from local council into state into federal, I really hate it. It's that real government mentality. And, I apologize to anyone that's government, but that union sort of, I see it with the unions and things like that, is that unions keep people strong, and they do. Don't get me wrong, collective bargaining is a good thing, but, unions also are responsible for keeping really bad employees in jobs and supporting people that shouldn't be there. So you've got that both sides of it. And then that's that thing, you served your time. You might not have done it well. You might not have accomplished anything, but you've done your time, you've ticked your box, let's move you on to the next step, because that's the natural progression. And, there's so many stories from people in government that, they work there and someone gets into a leadership role that has 0 leadership skills, but, they've been there for 30 years and they've done their time. So it's their right to have that job. And I think while we've got things like that, that's a major problem. And especially in politics, if you've towed the party lines, you get promoted. Whereas if you're actual free thinking and actually have the best for your community at heart, you sort of don't get promoted. So then we see that, that sort of ideology of politicians to get votes, but not not toe the party line because they want to get up the ranks and it's popularity. Because, look at the opposition leader at the moment, Susan Lay, I think her name is, I don't even know, but I know she had a corruption issue quite a few years ago. Somehow she's managed to be the leader from someone that most would say no one's ever heard of her, but she just had the right, did her time and is the good look at the moment, or what they think for their party. Really interesting, rather than, I think there's quite a few actual other people in that party, which would be a far better selection. I don't know. It's one of those things. So, mate, getting back to yours at Kiama, you're with Shooter Farmer Fishers. So have you noticed, and something I've said previously is that I don't feel the name does them any favours. I think that there's a lot of people that may not be over that space. Now, you're in a pretty good area because there's a lot of farmland and things like that. So it's probably going to hit the farmers, and most people on the coast would like to fish. So the fact Shooters is in there might sort of, not be as drastic as places like in cities and things like that. Have you found a little bit of apprehension because of that, or what's the go down there?
Yeah, absolutely. On that note, the party name's an interesting one, and I do get a lot of comment on it. I've had a couple of the old snarky Facebook comments of, well, you just shoot animals. Why should you be the MP for the area? It's been an interesting thing, and I really have enjoyed the opportunity to talk to people more about not just about the party, but about the demographic, the idea of a demographic of people that within the community are predominantly probably more conservatively minded, probably Anglo-Saxon in descent, probably more prone to be of a straight sexual orientation, to just completely generalise it. You and I know, and everyone in this podcast listenership probably knows of all of the nuance and possible spectrum in between that, but the assumption to the general media would be that would be a fit description for shooters, fishers and farmers. It's been pretty interesting to get to actually talk to a few people about it. The name itself, I can see people's ideas towards moving it, but I view it as a bit of an homage and a heritage call to the party's roots, not dissimilar to the Labor Party. The Labor Party still would go by the idea that they are the Labor Party of the labourers of that ilk, even though it's not the same spelling. It's that kind of notion that they hearken back to, despite the fact that, as you and I have discussed at length, and even here, that they're not necessarily hearkening back to those roots and having that. It is part of the thing. It is the name, and for a marketing term, it is the brand. So while I can see people's apprehension with it and the possibility that it might be better served by changing, I don't know what you'd change it to without watering down and ignoring the history that the party has. And in recent years, for right or wrong, and there's always controversy, as there is with everything political, we've actually got ourselves in a fairly strong position in that by having the current serving two members in the upper house. It was a good debate with a couple of people today in a face-to-face forum for the by-election about why an independent might be better than a party-minded person, because they've got the ability to influence a minority Min's government as it sits at the moment. The shooters, fishers and farmers have actually got themselves in a much stronger position if we are able to swing this seat and gain a foothold as a lower house seat, in that we have two upper house members who are able to work with the government and a fairly strong staffing group within the party to work with the government to achieve outcomes for the community without entirely selling themselves down the river just to follow the government of the day's line. So it's interesting that some people kind of go the line that, we should have an independent because they can lobby the government, push the government to do whatever. But to have a party that's actually got a bit of history without necessarily being adversarial, it'll be an interesting thing to see what comes of it. If we are able to do well in this seat, whether that actually leads to a victory in the seat or whether it just leads to a good showing on polling day, and we actually can say to the government, well, look, there is a lot of people in the area who are willing to put their interest in the outdoor lifestyle and the ideals of the party on the paper on voting day and actually vote that way, would put us in a very interesting position with what's been passed with the conservation hunting bill's progression. and a few of the other reforms that they're moving on at the moment. I'm very, very optimistic and very interested to see what the numbers on voting day actually get us to move that way with the government, and see what comes of it.
So how do you go about, you've just thrown yourself in here, you're not a career politician, you're just wanting to stand up for the local community and do some sensible sort of actions. How did you go about, what are the, I guess, the points that you're going to stand on? Because, you talk about these bigger parties, they have more resources, people who are, their whole idea is to throw money at this from a marketing perspective, also to try and find out what are the root causes for the issues. I'm guessing you haven't got a team behind you. There's going to be very much a one-man band for this one, or am I wrong?
Right and wrong to an extent. The party is providing support, but as far as the organic movement within the area, it's a fairly small team come one-man band kind of arrangement at the moment. I've got more experienced people from the party and also just people who've been experienced within the political spectrum, advising me and giving me ideas on how to do it. We, as you say, we obviously can't compete with the majors. They're throwing more money into corflute signage than I will make in the next 10 years of working my job, I'd imagine. There are some vast amounts of corflute being printed in all wonderful colours of the rainbow, and getting around the countryside at the moment, and we can't compete with that. So my goal is to work to a more honest and effort-based kind of an approach to it. I will put whatever time I can into getting to any forums that are on. I've got more Meet the Candidate events lined up. If people are interested, we've got a fairly good social media page going now, which will track all the events and keep people up to date with them, that people can come and have the face-to-face conversations, because a long-form face-to-face conversation, I think, means more, and not necessarily to sway people. Obviously, the ideal is to encourage people to vote number one for Felix, but to explain to them, at least have them understand in a better way what we're coming at. And even if they don't decide to vote for us, I genuinely believe that I can serve the community of the outdoors people, and that's not just the shooters, but is the wider fishers and farmers and four-wheel drivers and the camping fraternity and the outdoorsmen and women of the area, served better by putting a good foot forward and being able to actually explain why we're doing it. And we're not just here to shoot animals. We're not just here to go fishing and pillage all of the offshore fish stocks and all of the other things that those who are ideologically against us think we're here for. So yeah, I think it's a campaign that, for those that we can reach, will be more impactful than just slathering the countryside in corflutes and filling all the social media stuff with ChatGPT generated little blurbs and all of the cute things you're doing, and sitting there kind of filming yourself sipping lattes in the main street and all of the other cutesy things. I believe our approach to it will be more impactful for those we can reach, while acknowledging that we can't reach as many. So it's a bit of a trade-off there, but I would prefer to run it that way. As you said, I'm not a career politician, have no intention of being a career politician, and took the opportunity when it came up purely to serve the community as I can, in a way that kind of goes forward. And as I've said earlier, I've always been annoyed by the fact that politics comes down to retired old blokes and old women whose kids have moved on and their careers have petered out and they've got nothing better to do, so they go into politics, while simultaneously, for the most part, being disconnected with the community they're claiming to serve. So when the opportunity came up to do it as someone who isn't yet at that point in my life, I think I'd be a hypocrite and would be unimpressed with myself if I hadn't taken the opportunity. So it's a fairly honest, if in being honest, it's a low geared kind of campaign. But I'm encouraged by the response I've got from people so far. Even a few people who I probably would have expected to have been outright anti and not willing to listen, they have taken the time out of their day to listen and to have the discussions. And there's no way to know until polling day if that will actually serve us well. But I'm happy with the way we're running it so far. And I think as we get closer to it and people put a little bit more time into listening to what's happening, we may we may well at the very least do well to plead our case. And it won't be until the sometime after the dust settles after the 13th of September that we actually know whether it paid off or not. But I'm enjoying the opportunity as it goes. I think my wife is probably fairly bemused after years of having me traipsing off and spending all amount of time chasing deer around in the hills. I think she's just kind of accepted that this is what I'm doing instead of chasing deer at the moment. But no, good supportive family for it. The kids think it's kind of funny that I might have my face on some core flutes, and yeah, it's pretty interesting, and I think it's going fairly well so far. So hopefully the history books record that it has gone well, and maybe we've changed a few people's minds about what the cohort of shooters, fishers, and farmers actually entails, rather than just the stereotype.
Well, mate, props to you for having a crack, because I sort of think it's a very big thing to actually be able to do it and be in a position to do so. It's something that, I think Mark Banasiak, he was a teacher, and I remember listening to him talk about being a teacher, you'd have to actually, relinquish or quit your job before you get elected. So it's a very risky sort of thing to do, where you throw away, potentially your career and position just in case you get elected. And, who knows when it comes polling day. So I wish you all the best for it. And as I said, we chat a lot, obviously, and you're a very level-headed, someone I respect and think's quite intelligent. So I think you would do a fantastic job. So if you are out there and you know anyone down in that region, tell them to I'm not saying tell them who to vote for, definitely not, but maybe just get in their ear and say, hey, have a look at Felix, have a look at what he stands for, maybe get to one of these meet and greets and or follow him on Facebook and see what he stands for and what he's about, because I think that I think the position would be in good hands if you were to get elected, mate. So I wish you all the best with it.
No, thank you for that, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk tonight. If anyone's about down in the Kiama area, we will have some of the usual political paraphernalia to hand out at either of our two extreme outdoor sports shops, whether that be the Oak Flats one or the South Narrow one. And swing by and have a yarn, because we'll be out and about. We'll definitely be out and about in the coming weeks. And I hope that it's a thing that I can do well by the community, both the local community here and the outdoor community at large. And we'll reconvene after the polls have closed, and we'll see what's happened after the dust is all settled.
Well, mate, sounds good. Best of luck with it. Listeners, bye for now. You've been listening to the Australian Hunting and Beyond podcast with Matt. Thanks for tuning in, and can't wait to catch you next time. But in the meantime, if you want more, you can find it at linktr.ee/Australian Hunting and Beyond. That will give you our YouTube, Instagram, X, Facebook, you name it. We'll catch you next time.